This video is about trying to walk you through the project a bit. So if we have a look at this image here, so this essentially is the poster from using Illustrator. So the the subject is Ra, so it's about the sun, and this is the kind of layout. Now at this stage, when you're moving into utilizing Photoshop, you don't have to stick with exactly the same thing that you have here. You can change the poster around. You can use elements from this. So what I've done is when I look at this this image, I like the clarity of the leaves hitting the water. I think there's something really lovely within that, and so I've made one where I've essentially just grabbed that, and I've put a few bits on here as kind of reflection. So I've changed the layout somewhat. I kind of started to modify it. Now at this stage, before taking it into Photoshop, you must work with your layers. So if I have a look at these, there's a layer for that leaf. There's one for just the reflections. Everything is kind of separated out, and within that, everything is a group. So for instance, if I switch all of these off, I'll put this one on, and we spin that open, you can see down the list here there's no paths, everything is a group. So even if it's a single object, you want to go Object, Group, which is Command G. So veins on a leaf, if you want them to be separate and on their own layer, make sure that you group them. And all of these things, so this one here, if I wanted to come out separately, you can see that it's a path. I would go Command G, but we'll leave it as it is, so that we can kind of see the differences of how things are working. Now the one that I want to focus on at the moment is the right leaf, because I've set this up in a certain way, so I'll switch the others off so that we're looking at just the one we want. Now if I spin this open, we're going to see there's this top one, but when I switch it off, can you see that this top part of the leaf actually has a hole in it? And that's going to start to become a hassle. So you want to make sure that you're taking in shapes that you can work with. So in this case, what I would do is I would get this shape here. I would go in with the pen tool, and I'm just going to minus off these. In fact, these shapes aren't joined up at the moment, so I can just select them and delete them. And what this means is that I can play with and I can shade and I can color this in Photoshop, and I don't have to worry with it lining up with the layer above it. So this now starts to work a little bit better for me. At the moment there's a compound path, so I'm just going to go Command G, so it's a group, to make sure everything comes through the way that I want it to. So I'll switch everything on, switch the lock off, and now I need to go File, Export, Export As, and then I'm going to get my Photoshop option. I'm just going to call it Test VSD. This one here, Use Artboards, means that when things go out over the edge of the page, that's where it'll cut off. It'll cut off to the page. So now if I go Export, now whether it's CMYK or RGB, as long as you have this option here that says Right Layers, and you can switch these things on, that's what you're after. You don't want a flat image, you want to have that separation of layers. I'll go OK, that goes through, and now we can jump into Photoshop. when I open it up, find the test and go open. So at this stage, I can now go File, Export, Export As. I'm going to change the name of it. I want to make sure that it's a Photoshop file. Use artboards means that these bits that stick out over the edge will be cut off, like it'll fit, it'll bring in just what's on the page. I'll go Export, and there's options that come up here. Whether it's CMYK or RGB doesn't matter, as long as the option gives you right layers. As long as you can click on that. For instance, if I put it on RGB, I can't, it's just going to give me a flat layer. Make sure that the resolution is on 150, that's what we're working with. Right layers. Okay, and then it goes through and it exports it. Now we can jump into Photoshop, File, Open, and I can bring in my image, open, and through it comes. This timeline bit, I'll just delete that. So here we go. Here's our image, and if we look at all the layers, everything's coming through exactly as we want it. That one's just popped out of its group, but now if we look at this, we've got our bottom leaf, we've got our right leaf, got our reflections, got our left leaf, and the big leaf. So everything's coming through the way we want. And if we flip these open, what we're going to see, if we're looking at the big leaf here, so we're going to see we've got that. We've got this bit, which is kind of in its own group. If we wanted to, we could take that out of the group and delete that little folder if we want to make it a bit cleaner, but it's not a big issue, and you can kind of move the layers around as you want. We've got our background, and then this bottom bit, again, if we really want to, we can chuck it outside that group, so that we just have one group and no groups inside it. There we go, and then that, right, just grab the wrong one. So all I'm doing now is switching around the order. So it's vein on top of this, leaf vein on top of the bottom. Now that we have all these layers, this is when we can start to really modify and play around with things. So for instance, with this, one option I could have is I might say, okay, I'm going to make a new channel, a new layer above this leaf. I'm going to get a black paintbrush. I'm going to make it, I'll get a more general brush, make it soft, and make the size a bit bigger. Oh, actually the size is huge. Okay, so make it a little bit bigger, and then just using the edge of that brush, because it's so soft, you can see the shadow going over the top of that leaf. Really sussily. So now if I go up to, I'll go to filter, I'm going to go to noise, add noise. I've made it a bit speckly, monochromatic, so I can give that exactly the grain I want, if I would even want grain, but I like that effect. I'm going to go here to that layer and I'm going to go multiply, so it tries to bond it. I'm going to go opacity, so it becomes a lot subtler. And then the last thing is I just go between those two layers, hold down the Option key, I'll get the symbol here, and I can clip it. So it will only show up on the leaf. I can still go in and modify things and change the opacity, make it as subtle as I want. And so we're starting to build it up in this way that we can kind of bring in other layers and objects. I think that I had a leaf here somewhere. So this one we can bring in a minute, but I'll bring this one in. And I'm going to come up to the object selection tool, just go select subject, see if it does a good job of picking it up. It does. I can hit the quick mask. Got my mask, I come back on this layer, and with the arrow tool I'm just going to drag it up to the tab. When it comes up with the other image, I'll just drag it in to the page, let go, and it comes up. So in this way I can start to, add photographic moments in. Maybe I kind of want this to look like it's on the bottom of the water. So what I'll do is I'm going to go in here. Actually, what I'll do is I'll drag this out of that group and I just put it right up the top because I can make it into its own little group. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to hue and saturation. I'm going to go to colorize. Remember, I've got this little box here if I want to clip it, so it's only happening to that. I'm going to try and pick a blue that I think might tie in. I'm going to darken it down. The saturation, I can make it more grey, or I can make it a stronger blue. Close that, and I might click back on the layer and I'm going to put the opacity down of the object. If I did the opacity on here, then what I'm doing is I'm changing the opacity of the color down, and so it looks like a normal leaf. So I want to make sure if I want to be on that layer, so that I can make it like the hint of something sitting on the bottom of the water. So that leaf I can get rid of. And I'm going to bring in a new one now. So I'm going to bring in this leaf, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the bottom of this one. So again, I'm just going to see how good a job the select subject does. Not too bad. There's other videos about masking, so I'm not going to focus on this one for too long. It hasn't picked up that center bit, so I'll go Option, I'll click that. I can go into the select and mask at this stage, and I might say, okay, I'm going to just kind of suck it in a wee bit. So what I'm going to do is with this, I'm going to come down and go smooth the edge. I'm going to feather it, which seems a bit odd because I'm softening it. But then I'm going to give it more contrast, which sharpens it up again, and then I'm going to shift the edge so that it sucks in. And you can see it's given it quite a sharp, hard defined edge. So with that, I'm going to go OK. I could have set it up so that it was going to make its own mask and everything, but I must have had it on selection. So I'll just make my mask now. And I'll do the same thing. I'm just going to make sure I'm on that layer, drag it, hold it on the tab. When it comes to the new image, drag it in and drop it. This one, just because of what I had selected before, it's dropped into the wrong place, so I want big leaf. So I'm going to drop it into that folder, and obviously I have to do a bit of configuring. So I want that layer to be above the kind of bottom leaf, because that's the bit I'm replacing. So Command T, first thing I need to do, and I need to zoom out on this a bit. I need to try and rotate it, move it into position a bit. So, and then what I'm going to do is I've got a mask here, but while it's got that mask and I've got it clicked, I'm going to go up to the hamburger menu and I'm going to go convert it to a smart object. And then what happens is I don't need to worry about that mask. I can put a different mask on. If I double click, it comes up, just get rid of that one. It comes up with just this leaf with the mask. I can make changes, I can close it, and usually it'll ask me to save them here. So now with this I can add a quick mask on, and just going to move the leaf into position a bit. And then I'm just going to grab this top part of the leaf on my mask. I know that black blocks out. Black's my background color, so I'll go Command Delete, which is fill it with the background. And then I've got my leaf there. I can modify it so it lines up a wee bit better, but first I'm going to do something else. So what I want is I want to warp this leaf. So if I double click and come in here to this option here, when I warp it, I don't want it to get cut off by the edges, so I'm just going to make the canvas size a bit bigger, and the easiest way is just to get the cropping tool, drag a selection, and then to drag it out. Hit return or enter, and it gives me a bigger option. And that's because I'm going to do this. I'm going to go filter, I'm going to go distort, and I'm going to go to wave. It'll bring up a menu here, and you can see it starting to warp. This actually looks pretty good, but number of generations is 5. If I put that up, you can see it's adding in more ripples. So I'll put it back on 5. The amplitude, the closer I have those together, the more streamlined it is, the more I kind of have them a bit separate, the more it's getting a ripple. So this stuff you can kind of play around with and get exactly what you want. At the moment it's on sine waves is the best option. Triangular and square are going to give something a bit different. I just want a light warp. I'll go OK. Ooh, that was a little bit intense. I'll go back to it. wrap around. So unfortunately it's pretty hard to see at such a small size. Let's go with that. Maybe not enough, so undo. So now I'm going to go into filter, into distort, into wave. Number of generations is low, it's on 5. And I'm just going to try and give it a little bit more warping. You can see the wobble with this, with the amplitude. I can try and control how distorted it gets. Play around with it, have it on sine waves, go OK, and then I get quite a nice warp here. With this, I still have the mask. So this little bit that's down here, I can come in here and with black is my foreground color, and harder brush that's a bit smaller. I can just mark bits like that out with the mask. I'll close this and I'll save it, and those changes will take effect back in here. Now at the moment, because of the warping, if I move this, you can see the mask moves with it, but the mask is kind of in the right place. So if I unlock it, then with the leaf itself, the mask will stay where it is, and I can work with the warping of that leaf. I can come in and do a few things now where I'm on the mask. If the leaf sticks out a wee bit, I can come in here and tidy that up with a paintbrush, but again, non-destructive. It's just on the mask. I can see this underneath, so I could either delete that layer or just get rid of it altogether. Don't need the veins either sitting over the top. And now with this, I can come in and start to do the colorization stuff again. So I can come in here and I can go back to hue and saturation. I can go colorize, clip it, so it's only affecting this. It's a blue that I'm after, and I can bump the saturation up. I can darken it off. And we can get all these options in here that clipped, and we can start to play around with it a wee bit. So now if I click those two elements to layer and the hue and saturation, I can group them. Once I group them, I have the option of once again adding a mask. And so this mask will only work with this group. So I can do things like, we know that white and black block. So if I go to the gradient, I've got white and black. If I drag this down, the black is blocking it, so I want that the other way around. So if I click on it and go Command I for the opposite, this is now what you're going to get. You're now going to get this option where it looks like it's starting to disappear off. Maybe I can drag that a bit further, Command I, trying to make it a wee bit more subtle. I'll select all, and I can just delete it so I can see everything. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag from here going down, and I'm going to drag past the tip of that a wee bit. Try it again, Command I, and so we're seeing a little bit more of the leaf. So there's a lot of control that you can kind of add in here. Let's have a look at the reflections. Okay, reflections. So the separate, we've got one group, but this for one reflection, the other one there. So we're going to work with this top one, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make it a smart object, convert to a smart object, double click. At the moment the transparency is right down, so I'm going to boost that up so we can see it. And with the cropping feature, I'm just going to select that, and then I'm going to drag it out this way a bit, hit enter, so we've got a bit more space. And it's because I'm going to use that same filter. I'm going to go filter, distort, sorry, and wave, and see what sort of distortion I can start to give that water. How I can control it, changing the amplitude and the wavelength and some of these things to try and get a distortion that I like. Okay, so the scale, I'm bringing it back just so it doesn't go outside of those borders. I'm pushing this one in a bit, and I'll go okay, because I know that at this stage I can still add a mask. And if this is black, I'm just going to block out this one that goes off the edge, because that will define an edge which will look a bit odd. Maybe this one I might get rid of as well. I'll close that and I'll save it. Now I start to have this kind of interesting warp. If I wanted to get rid of that, I could add another mask on here, but I'll just double click it. Whoops, make sure I'm on my mask, and just get rid of it there. It was obviously just one that I couldn't see. At this stage I can go in and I can do all those things of giving it just the right amount of opacity. I can at this stage go edit, this transform, but this time I'm going to go distort. What that lets me do is it lets me pull some of these options in and drag them out. So what I'm doing is I'm just making it a little bit thinner and looking more like a reflection, or so I think, sort of thing. So it looks like it's more on the surface of the water. So we can start to build these images up and make them a lot more complex and a lot more interesting using Photoshop. Now, the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to start to bring in some texture. So if I go open, and this is where things like your monoprinting and that will really pay off. I'll open this up. I'm just going to go select all. I'm going to cut the image, close that, and then I'm going to come in here. I'm going to find my channels. My channels aren't there, so I'll find them in the windows. Drag that over so it's all in the one spot. I make a new channel, which is an alpha channel. I like to start with white. So white's my background color, so I go Command Delete. Remember, on a PC that would be Control Backspace, and I'll show the whole window. Now if I paste directly into here, I bring my mono printing texture in, and at this stage I'm going to scale it because it's just a texture. I know that I can I can mess with it a bit more. I can change the clarity and sharpen and everything. So the first thing I'm going to do is I need to make it more black and white, more harsh, because then that will give me a very clean mask. Areas like this that are still grey, I can change by basically going in to dodge and burn. Burn, if I have it on shadows, I can very quickly just run over those grey areas and it darkens them up. Now, at this stage, what I can do is if I switch the eye on beside RGB, I can actually see where these textures are going to add up. So I'm going to try and texture the other side of the leaf. So if I go Command T and I spin this around and I move it, what I'm looking for is I'm trying to move it around visually, whoops, so that I can see this, where the texture is and what part is going to look good over the leaf. So I'm just going to go with this. I might just rotate it a little and move it so it's fitting in better with the contour of the leaf. I'll go return and I'll go Command D just to get rid of that selection. So I'll switch the eye off. So this is what I've got. I know it has to be the opposite way around. Command I, because the white is the area that we want to fill with color or select. I'll hit the selection tool. I'll go into my layers and I'm going to find the right spot. So not in reflections, it was big leaf. And here it is here. So I can make a new layer and I'm just going to go Option Delete. Just that's filling it with a foreground color, which is black. Because I know that when I come in here, that I can still get the eyedropper tool. I can click on a color, so if I get that, I'm on the right layer, my texture. I can go Option, hold down the Shift, and hit Delete. And it keeps the transparency and fills it with the foreground color. So that would be Control Alt Backspace. Oh, sorry, Alt Shift Backspace on a PC. So now we're getting these textures going in. So I've got two textures now that sit in there. This one, if I wanted to darken it up again and make it a bit more prominent, I can. My layers, this time I'm going to look at the reflections. So I'm going to switch that one off, put on the reflections. This top one, I can end up using the channels in a very similar way. So if I get the channels here, and I'm going to click on this one. Remember, I can switch the eye on beside RGB, Command T. Let's reduce that a wee bit. I can rotate this, and what I'm looking for is I'm trying to drag it up over the reflection a wee bit. So if I have a look at this, it's over the reflection. So now I know it has to be the other way around. Command I, switch off RGB, because this is the area, the white area is what I want to be active. I make a selection, and in my layers I can come back here, and this time when I add a channel, I'm going to go Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal All. What that does is it gives me a blank channel. This is quite hard to see, so if I go Command H, you can't see it, but it's still active. Black is my foreground color, means that I can paint with the black, so I can control where I see this, where it kind of comes through. So all you'll see is over here I'm painting with black. If I go Command H, that selection's still there. So now I go Command D, and so what I've done is I've eaten away at the image but using the mask. So if I shift, click the mask, hasn't affected my image, just the mask is letting me see some of it and hide some of it. That's starting to get a bit complex, but it's still just another way of using the masking. Okay, so this is how you can start to build your images up and bring in other images, whatever they may be. Let's have a look at what else we've got in that folder. I think I had a nice image of a rock somewhere, if I can find it. Rock. Okay, let's bring this in. Same thing, we can click on the object selection tool, select subject. Looks like it's done a good job. Go okay, I've got that. With the arrow tool, I'm just going to drag it over the tab for the other image, drag it in. It's just where it's come up, it's clipped it, so I'll just unclip it so we can see it. And again, this could be an element that I bring in here, and what I can do is I can duplicate that. If I drag around part of it like this, then on this mask, if I go Option Delete, you can see it chops off the top half. If I go Select and Inverse, so it's got the opposite, and I go to the other layer and I go Option Delete. Oh, just have to switch on the eye. Option Delete on the mask, Command D. Can you see that these have given the opposite? I'll swap them around. So if I switch them off, that has just the top half of the rock, that has just the bottom. And now what that means is I can focus on the bottom, and I can again come in here and go Hue Saturation, Colorize as I've been doing, clip it so it only affects the bottom of that rock, make it a blue, darken it off, change the saturation up, and if I click on the rock, I can change the opacity down a wee bit. And we might have to play around that hue and saturation isn't really working there, so I'll switch it off, but at least with the opacity I can see that that's working pretty well. And I just need to go in and play around with the hue and saturation a wee bit more. Okay, so again, just adding other images in and starting to have a play around with it.